The story is about an unfortunate girl named Lee who didn't know what luck was. When she won the lottery, she was struck by lightning and transported to the demon world where she became its princess. For some reason, Lee had always been a loser. In a university exam, she was sure of all the answers, but she didn't pass. At the store, the things that were always in bulk ran out right before she arrived. The protagonist's lover left her for her childhood friend. She cried so much, especially after her drunken father threw an ashtray at her. That's when she ran away from home. She never managed to get into her dream university. Even when the girl was sick, there was no one to buy her medicine. She tried her hardest. That's how Lee Yoon lived her 24 years. One day, on the day of her job interview, she stepped in a pile of dog shit right outside the entrance to her new job. That same day, she went and bought a lottery ticket. Lee didn't get hired at work again and decided to have a few drinks to cheer herself up. Lee decided to check the lottery ticket. She did this pointless activity as she realized that nothing could ruin this horrible day anymore. Looking at the ticket, the girl realized that she had the first place. The girl cried and couldn't believe it wasn't a dream. She was rejoicing and thought that all the luck that had been prepared for her life had been spent for this moment. Lee was sure there was no God, but realized that wasn't true when the ticket turned out to be the winning ticket. She sat by the window and began to pray, thanking God, when suddenly she was struck by a lightning strike and died. Lee conducted an internal dialogue and did not understand whether she was really dead, because who at such a time dies from a lightning strike, even in his own house? The girl heard someone's dialogue and didn't understand what those sounds were and why it was so dark around her. Lee thought she was still unconscious. Then she remembered her lottery ticket. She screamed that the ticket belonged to her. The girl realized she was screaming in a baby voice and someone was holding her in their arms. Lee opened her eyes and saw a handsome man in front of her with a displeased expression on his face. She thought that it could have all been a dream, and her lottery ticket wasn't real either. She didn't want to believe it and screamed for someone to wake her up because she had the winning ticket. The stranger who held the girl in his arms said she had a similar face. He had a pleasant voice that sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly, he threw the girl to the floor. She didn't understand why she was in so much pain if this was a dream. Lee was glad that it was good that she at least fell on the pillows. The girl wanted to run away and crawled on all fours. She didn't understand why she was moving so slowly. Had she really become a child? It was unclear how old she was now, 5 or 4, and the problem was not age. It was unclear how the girl had long silky hair, which she never had before. The girl was being dragged somewhere. She didn't realize what this place was, for it was definitely not her room. She was trying to figure out what was going on and how she got there. The little girl screamed to be rescued and helped. The stranger threw the girl to the floor again. He reached out and used magic. Lee couldn't believe her eyes. She saw servants with long ears like a hare in front of her, saying they were ready to do whatever they were ordered to do. They were addressing the Demon King. The girl couldn't tell if she had heard the Demon King correctly and watched carefully. The stranger ordered to prepare the little girl and bring her to him. The servants took the girl and carried her somewhere. Lee found herself in a bubble bath that smelled like beautiful flowers. The girl was brought some delicious ice cream. She looked at her hands. They were just like a doll's. The girl felt like she was going crazy. She didn't realize if it was a dream or not. She remembered that she hadn't been hit by a truck, and she hadn't fallen off the roof. She couldn't be the heroine of a novel about the transmigration of souls. But it was unclear why she was in the body of a child. The girl understood that she had just won the lottery, but everything could have happened because of that strange lightning. Lee didn't understand what was wrong with that lightning, but she was sure that everything happened because of it. The long-eared servants asked if everything was okay, if the water was too hot, and if she liked their touch. Lee replied that everything was fine. The girl was changed. Lee looked at herself in the mirror. She really was very pretty, cute. The girl didn't know where to start to make sense of this situation. A lightning strike, transmigration into a child's body, a demon king, or ear dolls that moved thanks to magic. The dolls said that the girl looked very much like Miss Acela, as if she had been reborn into the world. The girl asked who this miss was. She was told that it was the lover of the demon king. Acela Nincher, one of the strongest sorceresses in the world, also the lover of the Demon King. She was so strong that many demons trembled and scattered when they heard her name. She had died over 1,000 years ago. The girl recalled the dialogue she had heard. The Demon King was told that he could have a harem of women, but he chose her because she was cursed to destroy the entire demon world, and also didn't love him at all. Lee realized that she was the Demon King's love that was reborn years later. The servants asked if the girl was comfortable or not. Suddenly, they were transported to some huge hall. Lee saw a throne in front of her where the very same Demon King was sitting. She didn't know if he would kill her or not, and realized she had to get out of there as soon as possible. The servants bowed and left. Fear enveloped the girl. She did not want to be alone with this man, but she realized that she needed to talk to him, and he had a mouth and ears, so he was capable of talking. The girl didn't know what to say to him, and went over phrases in her head about how she wasn't his long-dead love or girlfriend. She remembered again about the lottery, her first place, and cried. Her heart was beating very fast in her chest. She was worried that she might become one of those dolls. The stranger kept looking at little Lee and said that she looked a lot like her. The girl screamed that she didn't and he failed, that his magic didn't work. She told him not to even think about raising her for himself. Lee continued to yell to the stranger that she was actually a 100-year-old woman. The Demon King raised a finger and used magic. The girl's mouth closed and she couldn't say anything else. The Demon King finally spoke. He said that her name used to be Lee Yoon. The girl was shocked and didn't understand how he knew. Did he finally realize that she wasn't his lover and that there was a completely different soul in that body? The girl was afraid he would kill her. He raised his finger again. The girl flew into the air and started to approach the Demon King who was sitting on the throne. The girl didn't realize if she died here, would she go back to Korea after she died? It seemed to her that he was about to kill her. The girl realized that she had the face of his lover. She decided to take advantage of that by making the cutest expression. The expression on the Demon King's face didn't change. He was still watching her intently. The girl panicked again because she did not want to die again. Lee did not understand why he was silent and hoped that the power of her pretty face had worked. The Demon King said that if the girl wanted to live, she had to forget her past life. Using magic, he changed the girl into a beautiful pink dress and crown and named her Luciana Road Moon Bloodrain. The Demon King said that was her new name. Lee realized that she could finally open her mouth and say something. She couldn't miss her last chance at survival. The girl said that if she was a princess, she was in charge here too. And the stranger continued to watch intently. It pleased the girl that she had a crown. She spent an hour looking in front of the mirror and couldn't believe that it was really her and that this was real life and not a dream. Lee didn't understand how to accept her new life. The servants called the girl Princess Luciana. They were very concerned, fed and treated her better than when they first met. The girl assumed that the princess status was making itself felt. Lee was eating apples. They were so sweet it seemed she had never eaten them before. The dolls gathered around her and said that she was probably curious about a lot of things and could ask them anything. The girl asked where they were. One of the dolls answered that it was the demon world of Matahari, and, excluding the Holy Land, all others belonged to His Majesty. Absolutely all lands. In this world, everyone serves His Majesty the King. Kaon Mahana Road, Demon King Moon Bloodrain. In his teenage years, he killed his father, the previous Demon King, to take the throne. He is someone who can devour any kingdom and just as easily destroy if he gets bored. He is the one who fell in love with the sorceress who came to kill him, and the one who lost all hope because of her death. He's the one who did whatever he wanted, despite the minister's resistance. Lee listened carefully and realized that the skeletons in the castle belonged to the ministers. One of the dolls confirmed and said that he had already recruited new ones, so there was no need to worry. The girl felt like she was in a black comedy. Maybe it was because he was a demon. Princess Luciana realized that he had created her in an attempt to rebirth his beloved Acela. The servant confirmed that ancient magic helped create her. The girl asked who they were. The dolls said they forgot to introduce themselves. She said her name was Marianne and everyone else, they were her babies, and they were honored to meet Princess Luciana. The servant said she could order them around, but the girl didn't understand what she needed to do. The servants explained that all she needed to do was prepare for her ceremony and handed the girl some kind of document. But she had never seen letters like that and couldn't read what it said. Marianne said that she assumed it was created by special magic. The girl was still upset, but it was good to know that at least she wasn't born a commoner and only her soul was transported to this world. It was a good thing she hadn't moved into a man's body. The girl concentrated and began to read what was written on the parchment. It said that ancient magic was able to bring to this world a creature connected to fate itself. The beginning intrigued the girl. Lee realized that this creature, it was her Luciana Road Moon Blood Rain, a girl who had lost the light of love, trapped in a world of demons. Despite all this, she could open her heart and harness the power of love. The girl didn't understand what it was. She refused to read further, even though she had already read almost everything. The servants begged the princess to read to the end. It said that she was becoming the only princess in the demon world. Lee thought she'd rather be denied a job 20 more times than read this nonsense. She was an adult after all, and didn't understand why or how she had to do all this. They say that a person gets used to everything quickly, and to all this craziness Lee got used to in just one night. Time passed, and her ceremony was one day away. All this time, the girl only slept and ate. She was also practicing her dance for the ceremony. The rabbit said she was good at it. She hoped the ceremony would go smoothly. The girl felt like it was a kindergarten matinee, though she didn't really remember how they went. Lee was beginning to get visibly anxious. Marianne sat down to her and told her not to be afraid of making a mistake, since this was a first for her. She looked at Marianne and realized that in all her 24 years of life, no one had ever said those words to her. The girl laughed and said that she just didn't want to make that person angry. Marianne replied that if he wanted to kill her, he would have done it long ago. Upon hearing of the death, the girl cried again. The rabbits rushed to comfort her and told her that he had given her his last name, which only the greatest men, the rulers of the world, can carry. Lee asked how they could be sure, since the king didn't even know what kind of person she was. Marianne replied that she was too young to realize it. The servant girl said that she had been working for the king for a very long time and could tell for sure that she, Princess Luciana, was very important to him. The little girl said she was Noacella. Marianne took the little girl's hands and said that the birth was a miracle sent to them from above that could not be repeated, so the girl should not be worried. Marianne noticed that the girl was hungry and took her to eat. In front of Luciana was a table full of dishes enough for a whole family. She decided it was okay to try it all and wished herself bon appetit. Luciana remembered what Marianne had said about her being very important to the king and didn't understand why it seemed like nonsense. After all, he had almost killed her when she made a pretty face in front of him. The girl liked the food very much and said that the local chef could safely be given 3 Michelin stars. She was very glad that she had not been born poor and realized that Marianne was right and there was no need for unnecessary excitement, because if he wanted to kill, he would have done it long ago. That night, in a dark room lit by moonlight, she dreamed of her lost life. She dreamed of her lottery ticket and her money. She's a simple person. She didn't need a princess title or good looks. She just wanted a lot of money, which was almost in her pocket already. The moment she woke up, a horrible swear word came out of the girl's mouth. She felt like she was going crazy. She was constantly shaking and not in control of her emotions. She didn't know what to do about it. It was hard for her to live differently in this unfamiliar place. It was a very emotional dawn for the girl. She really missed beer and hoped this castle had alcohol, at least wine or whiskey. Luciana realized that it was unlikely that she would be allowed to drink alcohol at such a young age. She wondered how long she would have to wait until she was an adult, and if she could last that long. She also wondered how her father was doing. She liked to call him Daddy when she was a little girl, but as time went on, Daddy became a stranger and cold to her. That was the day he threw an ashtray at her. That's when their bond finally broke. She always wanted to congratulate him on some holiday, but didn't dare to call him. Once last year, she got drunk on her father's birthday and dialed to congratulate him, but he hung up. Her father had gotten married for the 2nd time, and she didn't even know it. Her mother and father are the same, although her father was worse because her mother gave up on her from the beginning and her father gave up on her over time. The girl thought the problem was her, because she was bad at everything. It was easier for her to be bullied than to fight and fight back. She thought that there was really nothing special about her, and she would never know the love of her parents. Luciana cried in her sleep. Next to her on the bed sat the Demon King, who ran his palm over her face and said that the princess should not have nightmares, and she calmed down. Coming out of the princess's bedroom, the king saw Captain Anubis. He bowed to His Majesty and asked if he really wouldn't bring her soul back. After all, it was not the soul of Mrs. Acela. The Demon King could read minds, so he himself knew everything perfectly well. He turned to the captain and said that from this second, he was appointed as the head knight of the princess, and instead of a human head, he had the head of a wolf. The captain of the Royal Knights was the second closest person to the Demon King after the sorceress Acela. He was a demon in dog form, known for his courage and loyalty. Judging by his sudden appointment as his personal knight, one could confidently tell how much the Demon King trusted him. Captain Anubis reflected on the fact that he had never looked after the child. Plus, he didn't know if she was really a child or not. This girl is a magical creature that had someone's soul in her. Anubis realized that orders were orders, and since he would be the princess's personal knight, he needed to meet her. His hair was perfectly styled and his uniform perfectly ironed. He wanted to make a good impression. The knight knocked on the princess's bedroom. The door was opened by Marianne, with Luciana hiding behind her dress. Anubis let a tear fall. It was a complete failure. After all, he hadn't even had time to say hello to her. Marianne said the princess was afraid of strangers and asked not to be offended. She recommended that the captain speak to her from afar. The captain bowed, introduced himself, and said he had appointed her his personal knight. The little girl immediately thought of having a personal knight standing outside her room at all times, and assumed that the king had placed his spy with her. The little girl thought he looked pretty good, but she didn't like that it was the Demon King's idea. It was the same with the rabbits. It took the girl a while to get used to them. She pondered what the king might do for refusing his gift and decided that she would look out for him. It wouldn't make it worse. Marianne told the princess that today, the knight Anubis would take her to the ceremony and asked her not to be afraid. But these words did not make the girl feel any better. She told Anubis that when the time was right, they would see each other then. But not now. Anubis realized that he would have a hard time with the girl, and she saw no point in getting close to him for now because she was already busy preparing for the ceremony. After that unfortunate greeting, the knight left. Marianne suggested that the princess prepare for the ceremony. The girl questioned what kind of person this knight Anubis was. In response, she heard that he was very sincere, just like the king, and she could trust him completely. This seemed strange to the little girl. Marianne had said it was a testament to how much the king cared for her, but she had no idea that she was making the situation even more suspicious with those words. Luciana didn't understand why the king cared for her so much. After all, it definitely wasn't love at first sight. Since the day they met, the princess had never seen the Demon King again, and they had never even eaten together. The girl decided that, in all likelihood, he really saw her as a former lover, and therefore did not kill her. And therefore her life is walking on the edge of the abyss. And the girl realized that if anything changed for the Demon King, she would immediately be killed or locked away. The girl looked very gloomy, and Marianne asked if she was okay. She said she was just a little brooding. Marianne put a crown on the girl and told her that the dress was chosen by the king personally, especially for her ceremony, and that it fit her perfectly. Before the ceremony began, Luciana read that document once again, and in it was written the speech she was to give. Luciana was a magical child and developed much faster than her peers, but when traveling to faraway places, Marianne always carried her in her arms, and the audience room was indeed far away. Luciana pointed a finger at Anubis, who was walking ahead, and asked that he carry her in his arms rather than the servants. It seemed to the girl that Marianne was tired, and here she also had to be carried. The knight gladly took the girl in his arms and smiled enigmatically. The princess was confused by this smile. The main thing for her was that he carried her normally. She didn't want the second person to smile so much because of her. They reached the right door. The girl realized that behind this door there were a lot of stairs waiting for her. That's how, after 15 days, she still met again with the Demon King. The king was sitting on his throne. The princess didn't know if he wanted to let her live after half a month, even though she wasn't his reborn lover. She didn't understand why he gave her his last name and made her a princess. Didn't understand how he should be addressed. Anubis brought the little girl to the throne where the king sat. He asked the girl to let go of him and sit with his majesty. She, of course, didn't want to, but she had to do it. The princess's heart was beating very fast in her chest, and it was hard for her to breathe. To her surprise, it was very soft there. If Anubis's embrace was just nice, the king's embrace could be compared to a soft cloud. She didn't even want to move. It was so comfortable, and she hoped she would stay with him longer. The princess tried to stop her thoughts and assumed that the king was using magic to make her comfortable in his lap. He put his hand on the top of her head, and she started to wave it away, remembering how much the bunnies tried to make the crown on her head look beautiful. The princess burst out with words asking him not to touch her head because he would ruin her hair. Suddenly she realized that when she is a child, words come out before she thinks of what to say. The princess realized that the king might start to get angry. She was afraid he would kill her. A man in a light-colored cape knelt down in front of the throne and announced that the ceremony could begin. The princess was curious as to what was included in the ceremony and wanted to get started quickly. The man standing in front of the throne began to recite the spell. The whole room was flooded with bright light, and a golden halo appeared around the girl, which was similar to the one His Majesty had. The princess had heard from Marianne that such magical halos foretold fortunes and talents. They varied in size and shape, but the bigger the better. Therefore, the entire Demon Kingdom temple was involved in studying her halo. The princess's first speech followed, and she was invited to the stage. The Demon King, with the help of magic, carried the girl there. She was glad that the moment had finally arrived and felt that she had to do everything perfectly. Although the girl was worried, her speech was confident. She said that thanks to ancient magic, a creature sent to them by fate had appeared in their country. A few hours before the speech, despite the suddenness of the event, all the aristocrats of the demonic world canceled their important business to attend this ceremony. Everyone had one question: who the king had decided to appoint as the princess. After Asella's death, the king no longer held banquets. Even many meetings were not held after that. Fortunately, thanks to Asella asking Kaon not to ruin himself, he didn't give up on his destiny as a demon king. The entire kingdom existed because of his magic. People whispered what kind of princess the king had. They thought he couldn't have a new love, because the king even wanted to take his own life. How great was his love for Asella? But seeing this child, all questions remained closed. Everyone noticed how much she looked like that woman. The only difference was her soul. It was not the same as Asella's, but maybe it was because she was still very young. Asella was an overconfident sorceress. The large eyes added to the sharpness of her image. She was a sorceress who didn't even need a wand. She wanted to kill the Demon King to increase her influence. It so happened that Asella fell in love with the Demon King at first sight and cursed him with such a common human feeling. But this child standing in front of everyone seemed different. The girl didn't feel Asella's life in her. She seemed very sweet. But why would the demon world want a kind princess? On the other hand, she didn't have the fortitude of spirit that Asella had. That was the point, because she would obviously be easier to negotiate with than the king's previous lover. It was because of this that the people of the demonic world welcomed Princess Luciana. In addition, no one wanted to object and cross the Demon King. No one had seen such a large halo before. It was similar to the king's halo. There was also an ominous prophecy about Asella, but that was not to be talked about. The princess ended her speech by saying that the girl who had lost the light of love had fallen into the demon world. But despite all the difficulties, she was able to open her heart and use the power of love. Everyone present at the ceremony was delighted. They thought that the queen was too cute, and that was her magical power. Some shouted that she wouldn't be enough with all the gifts they brought, and she could take their entire fortune. Some shouted that Princess Luciana was gorgeous. Anubis told the king that everything happened just as he had planned. Knight Anubis lifted the girl in his arms and told her to leave the rest to the adults and told her to go rest. The princess mentally appealed to her protector, saying that she too was an adult. Even though he knew that she was not Acella's soul, he didn't know that she had an adult soul, but Marianne seemed to guess. The princess reasoned to confess to them or not. She called Anubis and Marianne and told them the whole truth. She apologized for shattering their illusions and thought they must be shocked that their sweet, beautiful princess was actually a 20-year-old woman. Anubis laughed out loud and told the princess that she was still such a child. The girl was outraged by this and screamed that she was not a child and was 24 years old. But Marianne and Anubis continued to laugh, and the princess felt ashamed. She wished for her confession. Marianne said it depended on the creature, but in their world, 24 was the right age for her. Night confirmed what Rabbit said and said that in the demon world, people have to be at least 40 to be considered an adult. Marianne added that, in their kingdom, longevity depends on the amount of magic. The princess's magic is on par with the king's, and it's hard to even imagine how many years she will live. Ancient magic matched the right soul to the right body. The girl didn't understand what was going on and what they were talking about and how to react to it, good or bad. Luciana remembered how she had stepped in dog feces in her past life on the day of the interview, and didn't understand why she now had to suffer because of that jerk of a king. The girl didn't understand why, out of all the 24-year-olds on the planet, she was the one chosen, since there were so many people in the world who wanted to be princesses. Of course, as a child, she also wanted to be a princess, to have dresses, jewelry, princes who would be in love with her. She envied all the princesses who always had a happy ending at the end. The girl didn't need all that. She just wanted her lottery ticket, her reward, her freedom, and her life. Marianne sat down on the bed next to the princess, and the knight knelt before her and said that she seemed to miss the past world. He asked the girl if she was sure she was happy in her past life. In her past life, she had never been first, never even tried to be. When others fell down but got up and ran forward, she would fall down and stay put or retreat altogether. No matter how miserable she was, she wanted to live. That was her strength. Anubis had said that she shouldn't miss a life where she wasn't happy. The rabbit confirmed her words. The girl replied that she could have been happier, but at that moment she was transported here. The princess felt very sad. She lay in bed and thought that perhaps she should have pretended that everything was all right, for she would not be able to go back to her old life anyway. She thought that it would be awkward for her to see Marianne and Anubis after this conversation. Bunny held a candle in her hands and sat next to the princess on the bed. The girl reflected that even though Marianne was a toy, her smile was the realest. She really felt very good about her. The princess apologized for upsetting her and Anubis. In response, she heard that it wasn't true and everything was fine. Waking up in the morning, the princess was in a wonderful mood. Marianne carried her breakfast and suggested that the girl had had a good dream. She said it was the first time she had slept so well. Ever since she had come to this world, she had had nightmares every night. The princess couldn't remember what the nightmares were about, but she always woke up in a cold sweat. She had suffered from insomnia since middle school, so she was glad that at least there she was able to get a good night's sleep. Luciana asked what their menu was for today. Marianne set the pancakes in front of her, which she had really enjoyed last time. The princess was delighted. The pancakes were buttered and sweet with honey, the best she had ever had. Rabbit told her to eat slowly, for she had a lot of time ahead of her. There was indeed too much time. It had been so long since the girl had been there, but every day was the same. She had really gotten used to this world quickly, and once the preparations for the ceremony were over, there was nothing else for her to do. Marianne was busy. There were no other rabbits in sight, and the girl asked where they were. In response, she heard that the other rabbits were preparing for the banquet. The girl was surprised because they had just had a banquet recently. Usually, after the ceremony, a whole week, banquets are held and they start immediately. But this time, the start was postponed because of unfinished preparations. Marianne called the princess over and suggested that she take a walk in the garden today. The girl changed into a comfortable dress and they went for a walk with Anubis. Marianne said that she urgently needed to help the rabbits, but the girl knew that what she really wanted was for her and the knight to bond. Luciana was very hurt, but she really wanted to go for a walk, so she didn't betray Marianne's cunning. The princess was delighted with the views she was witnessing. Anubis offered to carry her in his arms, but she said she didn't need to, and she wasn't a child. Someone once said that a fool has no idea he is a fool. Likewise, children have no idea they have legs that are too small. The princess fell. Anubis picked her up in his arms. The girl reflected that this was the second time he had carried her in his arms. It had been natural at the ceremony, but now she thought it strange. She thought the knight was not a bad man, but she did not know what their relationship with the king was. It was hard for the girl to trust him yet. She trusted the rabbits sent by the same king, but not Anubis. That was her character. She was always wary, but sometimes too quick to open up to people. The knight asked if the princess was thirsty. The answer was yes. He put the girl next to the fountain. She was mesmerized by its beauty. The fountain looked as if it were made of gold. Anubis brought the girl a goblet and told her that the gems on the fountain and on the goblet were made especially for her blessing. The princess took the goblet in her hands. She wondered what the water would taste like apple and honey, or like orange juice. She took a sip, and it was orange juice, the most delicious she had ever tasted. The knight told her that in addition to the banquet that was being prepared, there would also be separate celebrations in honor of the princess during the week, and gold and silver from the palace, specifically, would be allocated to hold them in different parts of the country. Anubis added that the whole nation would then receive her blessings, and even small villages would praise her name. He wanted to suggest the girl to go elsewhere and held out his hand, but she ran away and hid behind a fountain. The knight realized that the girl was still afraid of him, and she did not know how to get rid of this prejudice against him, and hoped that in time it would go away on its own. Anubis took on the form of a dog and asked if the princess liked the look of him that way. She immediately ran up to him and began to examine him. The knight said that usually people are frightened by this appearance. Luciana said that dogs only get angry when they are protective and there are bad men in the world, but no bad dogs. Anubis laughed and said she was right. Their walk continued, only now the princess didn't want to run away. She pondered that perhaps she accepted the rabbits so easily because of their appearance. Anubis asked if she liked his canine appearance. The girl said yes, and remembered a puppy she had as a child. It was a very small black puppy. She remembered how much she cried when he died, but she didn't remember what happened to him. Maybe it was an accident, but she definitely remembered how happy she was at the time. The girl told Anubis that the juice really tasted good and thanked him for being the first to try and bond with her. The knight in return thanked the girl for opening her heart to him. After the walk, they went to the princess's room. The girl was eating pancakes again and chatted relaxedly with Anubis about many things. She told the knight that he was good, not as evil as the king. The knight told the girl not to be so hard on the king because he really cared about her and said it was okay to call him daddy. The girl thought it was strange, but the knight laughed and said that it was natural since she had his last name. In Luciana's mind came memories of her father throwing an ashtray at her, of how she had suffered from her relationship with him. The girl broke out of Anubis's arms and screamed that she would never call him daddy, and she didn't need a daddy at all, because she hated fathers more than anything else. The girl herself didn't realize why she reacted to such innocent words. Blood appeared on her lips, but her morale was much worse. Anubis knelt in front of the king's throne and realized that he had failed to protect the girl. She had hurt herself, and the king could take his head off right now. The demon king asked where Luciana was and immediately disappeared. While the knight went to the king, the girl was found by the rabbits, and 5 doctors were called to help her. It took 1 second to treat her, and it was unclear why they were taking so long around her. The girl was brought a magic elixir for recovery. Having injured herself, she could just drink it, but she thought the best thing for her health would be the lottery. The princess didn't want to drink the elixir because she was afraid it tasted horrible and wanted to show that she was okay, but she fainted. It was explained to the girl that her life was created by ancient magic, and even small wounds could behave strangely on her body. There had been cases like the princess, but only one. Besides, no records had been kept, and that was why they were so worried. If yesterday she was told that she would live for a long time, now they were saying that she could die at any moment. It was explained to the girl that she was a completely perfect creature, and they had never seen this level of magic before. The demon king appeared in the princess's bedroom. The servants encircled him and said they were willing to do anything for him because he had given them life, and the girl decided to pretend to be dead or asleep because she was a sick child. She would definitely not be awakened. The king called the girl by name. He had a gentle voice. She understood that he was worried about her, but they were not close. It was hard to understand him. Marianne said the girl seemed to have fallen asleep. The king put his hand on the girl's head, and she felt him share his power with her. She didn't want to admit it, but it was really refreshing. The king told the pretend girl that she had poor acting skills, and she realized that this was a complete failure. This was a chance for a conversation. The girl stood up and without hesitation offered to talk to the king. Kaon, ready to talk, sat down next to the girl on the bed. It seemed to her that he was too close, for she thought he would sit on the chair. Up close, his face seemed just perfect, but too cold, as if he didn't know what love was at all. Luciana wondered what the woman he loved was like. She asked the king what she should do. He repeated that if she wanted to live here, she had to forget her past life. But the girl thought that was nonsense. The princess noticed that the king smiled. She didn't realize whether he was mocking her or looking at her with contempt. The king asked what the girl wanted. She waited for this question and asked the great and noblest demon king to send her back. The king, with the help of magic power, made the girl fall asleep without answering her question. Luciana was annoyed that he was using magic against her. She realized that even such a strong, great king didn't know how to bring her back either. The girl drowned in a pink dream world. Luciana lay on the airy clouds next to the sun. She had always wanted to go to the sea, but had never gone. She had a part-time job, but there was only enough money for food and lodging, and now, in her dream, she saw the sea. It was beautiful and bigger than she expected. In the morning, Marianne came into the princess's room. Quietly, so as not to wake her, opened the curtains, letting the sunlight into the room. The girl woke up. The rabbit's concern was very touching. It was enough for her. The rabbit offered to bring breakfast. Knight Anubis knelt before the throne of the Demon King. Kaon had said it would take a long time for the princess to forget her past life. The knight felt his whole body tense up. It felt as if it was his last moments. He promised the king that he would do his best. The princess was too dear to the king, not just because of the similarities to Miss Acella, but there seemed to be another reason, the knight was curious to know. Going to the princess's bedroom, Anubis saw Marianne the rabbit. He realized that most likely the princess liked the image of animals because of being hurt by humans. Marianne said the girl was resting and asked Anubis what the king had said about the princess. Anubis asked how the princess slept, and Marianne said that the king had rid her of her nightmares. The knight, in confidence, told her that they were not nightmares but memories from a past life, that they were bad memories, and it seemed that the princess was very deeply wounded from the inside out, especially because of her father. The knight assumed that was why the king wanted her to forget about her past life. Marianne noticed that even though she had come to an unfamiliar world, the girl had never said she missed her parents, but it was unclear why she was so eager to return to her past life. Anubis explained that the girl would need time, and the king didn't exactly say anything, but from what he understood was that her soul was still connected to that world. Marianne was horrified. When the king rid the girl of her nightmares, he had actually just temporarily severed her connection to that world. But he couldn't sever the connection completely, or the princess's soul would disappear. If not severed, the princess would be able to return to her world. Marianne is a toy rabbit, a creature brought back to life with the help of the king's magic. Like any living creature, she had emotions and feelings, and she also knew very well what loneliness was. The other rabbits didn't have such a developed soul, and so they didn't understand what it was. Marianne was obliged to work as a maid in the palace because she would never be able to start a family of her own. One day, she met a princess who was also made with magic, and the princess was the most precious creature after the king in this world. Marianne was assigned to take care of the girl, and soon, they became very close. It was as if the rabbit had a sweet daughter. She didn't know what to do next. For now, she knew that the princess could go back to her world, and she was very sad about it. A few days later, the princess's training began. She finally had at least some classes after the ceremony. She was to be trained in magic. Marianne explained that the plan was for them to start training after the festivities were over, but the king insisted that they start earlier. The princess asked when the banquet would be. The king told the rabbits that it would be better to have the banquet when she already knew the basics, especially because there would be other aristocrats at the banquet. Luciana hoped that the banquet wouldn't be moved even further. All the stares and talking behind her back was hard to endure. Marianne told the princess that there was a recording of her speech and asked if she wanted to see it, and handed her a crystal ball. Marianne said her beauty, great speech, expression, and dance, everything was perfect. But watching the recording of the ceremony, the girl saw the horror, and in the 15 minutes of watching she felt even worse for what she saw. The bunnies were hooting and said they did a great job, and it's been a long time since they've had a celebration of this caliber. They also said they had already made over 1 billion copies. And Luciana felt like she'd rather step in dog shit one more time than watch that tape. It was explained to the princess that this video was supposed to be sent to everyone in the demon world, so that everyone would fall in love with her because she was like the cute little angel in the video. It made the girl laugh that even in the demonic world, an angel is a compliment. Strangely, in this world, the concept of angel and demon were not contradictory, and even the war of good and evil had ended many years ago. Thinking about it, the girl realized that nothing could be changed and decided to just forget it and fell asleep. Waking up, the girl ran to Marianne and said that she wanted to learn magic faster. She was given a glass of juice and dressed up in front of the mirror. Today, for some reason, special attention had to be paid to appearance. The girl didn't understand why. After all, they were going to study. Marianne said that today was her first lesson with the king. Out of surprise, Luciana spat out all the juice she had been drinking from her mouth, and now she could be called the Princess of the Golden Fountain. After changing Luciana's clothes, Marianne explained that there would be doors at the end of the hallway, and she needed to enter there. In that room, the Demon King had studied magic in his childhood. As she entered the room, the girl saw the king looking at the potion bottles. She pondered how to address the king, because he was silent and did not pay attention to her, as if pretending not to hear. The girl deliberately dropped what she had in her hands, but the king did not move. She realized she could not call him Papa, as Anubis had suggested, and remembered how Marianne had addressed Kaon. The girl bowed and said she welcomed the Demon King who had given her life. He asked not to flatter him or speak to him so formally. The king no longer seemed as scary to the princess as before, but that look still worried her. He gave the girl a book in her hands. She took one look at it and realized that they would indeed be learning magic. Kaon told the girl to rewrite the marked sheets 50 times. The princess was shocked by this. She thought she had such a small hand and could only hold a spoon. Also, she had never seen writing like this before. Of course, she managed to read her speech, but she didn't understand how she could rewrite the whole thing 50 more times. Luciana suggested to the king that she would write 30 times and then offered to cut it down to 10. Hearing this, the king told her to rewrite it 100 times. The girl realized that this was a complete failure. After thinking about it, the king said that she was like an adult. He told her to sit at the table. The princess was about to agree because it was better than idling. She took a quill and began to rewrite pages from a book. The Demon King sat on the couch behind the girl and watched what she was doing. She was getting good at it. Luciana realized that writing wasn't that difficult. She understood the language well by ear, speaking, reading. But she didn't think writing would be so easy either. In this book, they wrote about the power of nature outside the body and about the energy that was in the body, about different kinds of magic. For the girl, there were a lot of obscure terms, but it was even interesting for her to write. The girl noticed that her handwriting was not bad either. She almost considered herself a genius. Luciana had written 10 pages, and her hand was getting a little sore. She decided that she would write 20 more and rest. At that moment, her written sheets with the quill flew into the air, straight into the king's hands. She said she wasn't finished and told him to put it back. Using magic, the Demon King lifted the girl up and sat her on his lap. He took her little hands and started massaging her hands. The girl was very surprised. He said it was okay and lunch was ready. With his kindness, the Demon King was something like a human. Today, Luciana, for the first time ever, had to have lunch with the king. The princess really resented it. She didn't want to eat food at the same table with a man she was afraid of. She realized that there was nothing that could be done, and if she was told to eat, then she must do so. Kaon watched the girl and told her that she had a good appetite. She responded by saying he didn't have a good appetite, and laughed. Luciana realized that she could eat lunch with Marianne, although she used to think that it couldn't eat since it was a toy. But Marianne told her that magic made it possible. Rabbit refused to eat with the girl, as it was not due to her status, but she managed to persuade the servant. But now, the whole plan was a failure because of the king, who did not even have a cup of coffee. The girl was indignant because he had not eaten anything, and she suggested that it might be the second serving. The princess asked if the king always ate so little and how he survived in such a case. He replied that it was enough for him. Luciana could not believe that this was all the amount of food he consumed, and against his background, she ate a lot. The girl asked if the king tasted good, but he said he didn't know since he couldn't taste it. The king did not like food much before, but after the death of his beloved, it became even worse. The girl pondered the fact that he had suddenly decided to eat with her to remember times with his beloved. She realized that they were alike and feared that he was trying to raise her for just that. The Demon King could read minds. He knew what she was thinking and told her it wasn't like that. Kaon told the girl not to think about it. She asked why he was so good to her. After all, she thought she was a mistake and didn't understand why he gave her a roof over her head, food, maids, and even a title. Kaon told the princess that she was like her, but she was a different person altogether. The princess is his only heir, Luciana Road Moon Bloodrain. The girl realized that it wasn't a joke, and so it wasn't that bad. That day, she rewrote the text from the book 50 times and spent her free time with the rabbits in the afternoon. In the evening, after her lesson with the king, she had dinner and went back to her chambers. The princess had started with 10 repetitions, but now she was only doing 1 or 2. She realized that a lot of time had already passed. You could tell that she was getting more and more used to living in this world, and the first sign of that was that she was no longer afraid of the Demon King. The princess even met his gaze calmly. She understood that she was not going to be killed. Their communication had already become habitual for the girl. The king handed Luciana a pouch. She opened it. In the pouch was a beautiful ring with blue and yellow stones. She immediately put it on her finger, on her middle finger, and showed it to the king. She was sure they didn't know such gestures in this world, but the king looked at it and said it was over the top. He took the ring off Luciana. She felt like she had been caught doing something bad. The girl told the king that she felt like he was reading her mind, and he confirmed it, because he really was. The king told the girl to tell everything she had read in the book. The princess told her that demons are the best creatures in the whole world because their power is the energy in the body. People in the demon kingdom can also use magic, but they need special items. The king said that usually all human wizards use special staffs. Luciana looked at his eyes. They were like a pussycat's. She had read in a book that each staff contained magic crystals. Then she looked at her ring, which also had crystals on it, and realized that it was her magic staff. The king replied that it turns out her head on her shoulders was not for beauty. Luciana was infuriated by this, and the girl jumped on his foot. She continued to stomp on the Demon King's foot. He tolerated it for a while and used magic to sit the girl down on the couch. Kaon told her that she was no longer a mere human, but now she was a magical creature with too much magical power. Luciana assumed that the king was training her for safety. She realized that it was now a magic ring, a sort of magical staff, and when her fingers grew, the ring would look even more beautiful. The princess wanted to be an adult as soon as possible, but she realized that it was unlikely she would grow up in the next few years, and she realized that meant the lottery would just go back to the national bank, because the winnings could be taken back within a year. The Demon King read the girl's mind and turned to her. He told her to swipe her finger across the light, just like when she was texting. The girl swiped her finger in the air and drew a magic circle, the same one she had transcribed from the book, and that was why it seemed so familiar to her. The book said it was basic magic. The king had made her rewrite symbols she didn't fully understand. This force pushed the girl back to the couch, and Kaon explained that it was basic defensive magic. The girl said that the book said that the magic felt like progressive waves and she didn't feel it. The king assumed it was because she didn't have enough experience, or maybe because she was too stupid. Since the king had no reaction to her words and pranks, she could quietly progress in her study of magic, learning something new every day. In the evening, Luciana returned to her bedroom. The rabbits were already around her, asking if she liked the lesson. The girl said she enjoyed it very much, but it was over quickly. Marianne explained that it was better to learn magic slowly, then she would definitely become a grand sorceress. The girl asked Marianne if she had magic, and the rabbit, with a swipe of her finger, changed the girl into different clothes and said that was magic too. Usually, the rabbits did the work themselves, but in times of need, they could use their magic. Luciana wondered, since when she had even gotten used to magic in her life. Marianne went on to say that she had a very small supply of power, and so she could use it for simple things, like moving things around. It was amazing, since that was also a superpower. Luciana told her that their magic world was like those that only appeared in fairy tales. Marianne was very surprised that the girl had lived in a world that didn't have magic before. Marianne learned that in the girl's past world there was science, and that with a magic ball, meaning a phone, they could take and transmit videos around the world. Bunny realized that the science in the two worlds was very different. Marianne told the girl about how their world had alchemy, but it was bad science. Luciana decided to take the book and repeat everything she had learned today. Rabbit set her a candle and told her not to stay up too long, for her body was already tired from using magic. The rabbits wished the girl sweet dreams. She decided that she would read for a while and sleep as well. Luciana leafed through the book and pondered on basic defensive magic, beginning intermediate and high level. Hexagrams were used for the basic level, but the Demon King used something else, and Luciana decided she would make sure to find out what kind of magic he used. There were many ways to control magic. There were also particularly rare ways that weren't available to everyone. A magic circle that connected higher black magic by amplifying basic defense magic. The Wizard of the Magic Circle is endowed with 3 levels of powerful protection magic, and if all 3 levels of protection are used, and the wizard's life is in danger, then all the wounds inflicted on the wizard can be transferred to the victim whose name is written in the magic circle. The girl realized that it was possible to wound someone other than her, and remembered that it was unlikely that the king had written his name. She didn't realize who had sacrificed in her place. She supposed it could have been her loyal knight Anubis, but then realized that was unlikely, as he had served the king long and faithfully, and it made no sense to do such a thing to him. Thinking about who might have been sacrificed, for some reason the girl thought of Marianne. She cried and started calling for the rabbit. Anubis came running to the noise and asked what had happened. He took the girl in his arms and she told him her thoughts. The knight calmed the girl down and told her not to worry about such a thing, because the king trusts Marianne as much as he does. And if her name was really written there, then His Majesty is a complete fool. The girl laughed. Anubis offered to call Marianne, but the girl didn't want to wake her up. The knight said that the rabbit would only be happy that the girl cared for her so much. He was right. The princess really wanted to see Marianne to calm down completely, because only thanks to her, she was able to get used to life here, so she won't be able to do without her. Marianne was like a new family to Luciana. She had agreed to let Anubis call her. As she waited for the rabbit, the girl lay on her bed and contemplated asking her to sing her a lullaby. The girl heard someone's it voice saying that they were lonely. She walked out of her bedroom and saw a dark hallway. Luciana assumed that someone at the end of the corridor might be asking for help. The princess ran down the hallway and heard this voice keep coughing and saying that he was in pain. Because of her short legs, the girl couldn't run fast and decided that next time she would learn leg lengthening magic or just learn how to move fast. Luciana came to a dead end. It was closed, but a voice was coming from there. She thought maybe she should go back and come here already with Marianne and Anubis. The voice was getting fainter, saying it didn't want to die. The princess held onto the iron bars with her hands as suddenly they broke and she was able to get through them. It was good that the girl now knew the magic of defense. She decided to run further. The guard came and saw that the iron fence was broken. It was clear that someone had used protection magic there, but it was strange because there was magic on the fence too. Luciana hid around the corner and regretted breaking that door. The hooded man told the guard that only high-class magic could destroy this magic. He asked if the princess could have gotten in here, since only the king and her possessed such magic. The guard called the hooded man Julian and replied that the girl could not have gotten in here, for she was under constant supervision and protection. Julian said that anyone with magical powers would suffer severely if they entered this place. Their body would be crushed, and they would die without being able to even breathe. Julian said that this was what happened to his ancestors, and in just 3 seconds, his fate was predetermined. The girl watched from around the corner and waited for them to leave. Julian threw off his hood, and the girl saw that it was an elf with golden hair. The elf said he wanted a closer look and walked over to the metal fence. He said that most likely the creature that did this was already dead. This was the 3rd time this had happened. All this meant that the system wasn't perfect. They decided that they needed to tell the king about it. Julian thought that when the king found out about it, it would be very bad for them and suggested not telling, but the guard disagreed and said that they couldn't leave it as it was. If the king found out that this creature was here all the time, especially when the princess is in the palace, they would have their heads chopped off. Luciana knew how terrible the king was in anger, but she had forgotten that already, but she thought she could just pretend she didn't know anything. Julian said that the king's magic wasn't as great as it used to be, and they should just wait and kill the creature as the king wanted. The girl ran outside and saw that there was a staircase and the dungeon was very deep. She wondered what was in there and pondered whether she should go down. But the princess decided to go back. She was used to the local life and didn't want to spoil anything. Anubis and Marianne were already looking for the girl. Marianne put the princess to bed. She and Anubis wished her good dreams and left. The girl pondered whose voice she could hear, but whosever it was, it could be heard that the voice was in great pain. She realized there was nothing she could do even if she went back there. The princess decided that she would need to learn healing magic, and it could still come in handy in the future. She was going to ask the king to teach it to her tomorrow. But the next day, she learned that there would be no magic lesson because the king had gone to a meeting and would be away for a few days. The girl was agreeable to another teacher, for someone must teach her instead of the king. She remembered Julian and asked to call him. Anubis was carrying Luciana in his arms, with Rabbit walking beside him. They were on their way to Julian's laboratory. From the outside, the building looked like a large botanical garden. Marianne told them that Julian was always changing locations, that he was here in the spring and fall and elsewhere in the summer and winter. Marianne said that this was the first time she would see Julian, and Anubis said that they had never spoken but had seen each other. They walked closer, and Marianne opened the door. They entered a huge glass laboratory. The guests greeted Grand Archmage Julian, and he greeted them back and said he was glad to meet them. Anubis placed the girl on the floor and asked the elf to greet the princess first. Julian showed all his courtesy and introduced himself to Luciana. His name was Julian Hazard. Although he was an elf, he had already worked as a wizard in the demonic world for many years. Normally, elves are much more closely connected to the world of angels, but his ancestors had long been banished from the sacred forest. He was born and raised in the demonic world. Many thought he was a dark elf, but still, he was able to keep the honor and nobility of the elves, as his ancestors did not practice black magic. And from the moment he was born, he could become neither a full demon nor a full elf. Perhaps that's why he was so excited about every discovery and also worked as an archmage in the palace. The princess who appeared before him seemed special. She introduced herself, and he motioned for her to come to the table. They sat and talked. The girl asked if she could just call him by his first name. Julian said that the girl could call him whatever she wanted, and he would do his best to replace the king in their classes. Luciana thought he would be arrogant, but luckily that turned out not to be the case, because he treated her to tea and promised to educate the girl. Mariana congratulated the princess on finding a new teacher to replace the king in his absence and thanked the elf. She said she would be picking up the princess after class. Marianne was worried that Julianne would refuse to train such a high-ranking person, but thankfully it worked out. They began their first lesson. The elf was saying to express her wish, and the girl was asking how many times she needed to rewrite everything. Julian didn't understand what the girl was saying, and when he did, he was very pleased that she had rewritten his creation 50 times. The girl was glad that she didn't have to write anything and thought that the jerk king was just mocking her. She decided that she would get back at him for that. Julian had told her that magic was usually studied when one had already decided on its direction, depending on one's skills. The girl's magic was enough for any direction, and he asked if perhaps she herself would like to study any of the directions. The girl shouted happily that she wanted to study healing magic, but it was clear from the elf's face that there was some problem. He told her that healing magic was mostly practiced in the angel world, while demons messed around with destruction magic. Luciana said she didn't want to learn destruction magic and didn't see the point in breaking something if it had to be repaired anyway. Julian explained that demons have a hard time learning healing magic anyway, and usually just improve their defense magic. She remembered that when she had hurt herself, a healer had come to her. The elf told her that it was very rare, only 2% of all demons have healing magic. Luciana was already getting upset that the elf wouldn't be teaching her healing magic. He said it was much easier to kill than to heal someone. Destruction magic is similar for all worlds, so he could easily teach it. Healing magic is much more complicated, and they would have to study it for a long time. The girl asked what to do next. Julian said he could teach her how elves do it, since she is not an ordinary demon, but the only princess of Matahari. He asked if the princess would like to learn elven magic. She gladly said yes. Suddenly, the princess found herself under a waterfall of cold water. Julian told her to hold on and told her that she was doing great. At this point, already the girl was ready to drop everything and go to the healers than to endure this hellish suffering. The elf made the girl some warm tea to keep her warm, but she thought she would die under the cold waterfall. Julian said it wasn't that bad and asked if she felt the energy of the water. The girl replied irritably that of course she felt it from head to toe. The elf said that the waterfall was very strong, but it couldn't overpower her, and she just had to sink to the ground. That was the flow of existence. Julian took a knife and cut his palm. He continued to explain that when the flesh comes in contact with the flesh, you have to think of the flow of water and immediately use your powers. Julian kissed his wound and it immediately healed. He said that the princess could start with a kiss, and then she could move on to touch or even a look for healing. Luciana was surprised that elven healing magic held on kissing and asked how many lessons it would take to heal without kissing. The elf replied that it all depended on talent, and the girl had plenty of it. He suggested that it would take about 100 lessons. The princess didn't really like this magic anymore and would rather stand under the fountain. But the girl remembered that right now, in those cellars where she had been at night, someone was in pain. Julian held out a cut finger to the girl, and she kissed it, and the wound healed. The elf told the girl that her power had its own pleasant flavor. That was the end of their lesson with Julian, and Marianne came to take the princess away. She received a magical book of elves and a cookie as a memento from the elf. Julian seemed very nice to the girl, so she began to wonder if she should ask about the dungeon. She remembered that he wished the owner of that voice dead and was hardly going to help. Luciana stabbed her finger with a needle and kissed it to heal it, and the defense magic the king had taught her didn't activate for such minor wounds, so she was able to continue learning and practicing in peace. She had to suffer a little, as she had to poke herself with a needle every time, but she was used to it by now. Luciana had a special elixir from the healer, and if she wanted to get it, she would have to tell Marianne about what was going on in the dungeon. She thought it was better to do it later and wanted the rabbit to be safe. The girl made a plan. She was able to be alone at nighttime, asking Anubis to call Mary. She asked for a night snack, and so she had a little more time to escape. The girl went down to the entrance of the dungeon and saw that in just one day the metal fence had been repaired again. She realized that if she broke the bars, Julian and the guards would come again. But there was no other way, and the princess went on the attack. She broke the metal bars the first time. Luciana ran down the stairs and thought she could heal the creature before Julian came and hid. In the darkness, the girl stumbled and fell. She kept hearing the voice, and there was even less power in it. She wished he would wait for her. The iron bars were in the girl's way again, and she tried a second time to break them, but all in vain. She felt as if her head was about to explode with pain. A voice asked who it was coming, and she identified herself as the princess of the demonic world. Luciana, for the second time, was reborn into a fantasy world and became a princess, a girl whose life was devoid of worries. It could be said that she had even lost touch with reality. Rising up, the princess saw a huge cage and chains. The princess looked at the chains and the cage and realized that they were needed to contain just one person and assumed that he could be very dangerous. It was quite dark, but she could see that there was a child inside the cage. The girl speculated that he might be only a few years older than her. The person inside the cage asked who she was. When she heard his voice, she was convinced it was a child and couldn't just turn a blind eye to his suffering. The princess asked not to be frightened and said that she came because she heard him crying. She told him that she had magic, and if he was in pain, she could heal him. She felt like she was like an angel from heaven to him now in this situation. The boy in the cage told the princess to get out and said that if she took a step closer, he would blow her head off. The girl replied that she was a living person, and how would she live without her head? The cage had protective magic on it. Luciana should have been afraid of him. He said it was a last warning and he wouldn't look at the fact that she was a child and would kill her. The princess screamed that he was wrong and told him that she was an adult at heart, for she was living her second life. Luciana poked her head between the bars of the cage and told her to come closer to kiss and heal the captive. The princess examined the boy and saw that he was incredibly handsome. Who knew the demonic world had such handsome men? He looked very much like the demon king, though they had different eyes and hair. The boy asked if she knew who he was. The girl realized that they were indeed too similar, though they spoke differently, but their aura and looks were very similar. The princess was already convinced that the king wasn't bad, and she hoped the boy was too. She didn't understand why she was going through all this, but she noticed that he wasn't that injured. He was completely chained up and had blood on his clothes, but he said it wasn't his blood, but the blood of those who died because of him. The boy told her that his tongue had been cut off. The princess was horrified and did not understand what was happening in the palace. For all this time, she had taken the kindness of those around her for granted. But right now, in front of her eyes in the dungeon, was a wounded child. She reached through the bars of the cage and told the boy to come over so she could heal him. The captive clearly did not believe this girl, but crawled closer. Luciana told him to be thankful she wasn't one of those dreamy girls. The princess grabbed the boy, pulled him closer to her, and kissed him, trying to heal him that way. It was like kissing her favorite toy, easy and simple, but at the same time amazing, because Luciana could feel her magic flowing like waves to the other child. The wound was large, so it took a lot of power. The boy was in shock. His face was red, but his tongue was already in place. He asked who was doing magic this way. Now he could speak, but the girl still couldn't understand why he looked so much like the king, and thought that maybe it was his son, although she remembered that Acela didn't have children. Besides, if the king had a child, why would he need a new princess heir then? Cutting off his son's tongue, that was overkill even for a king. The girl wondered if Acela's death was an accident. The princess had heard the story that after the death of a wife, fathers often began to hate their children. She thought she knew Kaon well, and he was not capable of this, for he treated even a harmful girl like her well. Besides, Acela had died years ago, and no matter how long the demons lived, the boy would look much older in that time. The princess introduced herself that she was Luciana Road Moon Bloodrain. The boy laughed and introduced himself with the same name as the Demon King. The girl couldn't believe it. She heard Julian and his guards already running towards them. The boy indicated to the princess with his hand that she could hide behind a pillar, and she moved there. The girl realized she couldn't control her body and assumed it was his magic. She noticed that her defense magic didn't work, which meant that the boy wasn't trying to hurt her. The princess thought he had his tongue cut off because he was inducing a state of hypnosis. The guards, along with Julian, came later than the girl had expected, but there were a lot of them. It hardly takes that many guards and an archmage to capture one child. They raised their weapons and used defense magic. The guards spoke of finishing the job before the king returned, must hold out until reinforcements arrived. Their cage captor told them to drop their weapons and stand empty-handed, and the guards dropped their swords. Julian did not understand how the boy could talk. The captive told the elf to stop asking questions and open the cage, and for everyone else to kill themselves. The elf tried to stop them, but the guards fell to the ground unconscious. The elf said he had to be ready for his attack because of the absence of the king. The boy said, "Let Julian write that in his will." The elf was angry and said he should have killed him sooner. The princess from around the corner watched everything that was happening and realized that she had to do something, because otherwise they would all die. The captive was about to order Julian to die, as suddenly Luciana ran out and stood between them. She greeted the elf and told her to listen to them carefully if they wanted to know her story. The boy in the cage yelled to the princess that she was crazy. She replied that she was just pretending to be a fool. The captive said that even fools know how to save lives and called her stupid. Luciana reminded him that she had saved his tongue and told him to speak softly to her. The boys asked whose side Luciana was on. She didn't know what to do. She didn't realize which side she was on or how she should answer. There was also no one to ask. He continued to shout. The princess called the captive a bastard and ordered him to shut his mouth, pointing at him with the finger that had her magic ring on it. If he said any more, she'd stop having compassion for him, and he seemed to understand. Luciana told the elf that she was sorry, but she did help this boy. Julian didn't understand why and didn't understand how she could have ended up in such a place. The girl explained that she didn't mean to help, but he was in pain, and she decided to do it. She realized it was her mistake, and she had helped even though she knew she had put Julian and the guards at risk. Julian sat down with the princess and told her that it was okay, because she didn't know anything about it. He asked her not to worry and told her it was his fault. The caged captive told them to leave, just leave. Reinforcements arrived and took the soldiers who had passed out. Anubis and Marianne were very excited, and Bunny said to scold the princess because they were very worried. She almost fainted, but she couldn't because she was afraid it would scare the princess. The little girl cried and promised she wouldn't do it again. She was very ashamed. She did not fully understand what she had done. The little girl said it was her fault and continued to cry. Anubis sat down beside her and gave her a handkerchief to blow her nose. Marianne was crying too, and the girl ran up and hugged her. She thanked Rabbit and Anubis for worrying about her, for supporting and helping her. The next morning, Luciana woke up. Marianne wished her good morning and brought her breakfast. There were many of the princess's favorite foods, such as a big special sausage. The princess thought Marianne would be upset after yesterday, but she looked happy and didn't seem to be mad at the girl. Bunny said it was amazing because yesterday's events had helped them bond. The girl was glad that Marianne thought so too. Sometimes bad things aren't so bad. Bunny told the princess that she loved her very much, and when she went missing last night, she experienced a lot of different emotions. Marianne put her palm on the princess's cheek and said that when she's around her, she doesn't feel like a doll, she feels like a mom. Luciana replied that she felt the same way and called Marianne Mom, and they started hugging. A real family doesn't have to have the same blood, but the princess couldn't call my mom. She was reminiscing about her mother who had abandoned her in her past life and didn't know why she had negative emotions towards Marianne. The girl told all her experiences to the rabbit, and she understood her. She realized that she was already unique to the princess. Luciana asked about the plans for the day. The princess suggested that the rabbit make lunchboxes and give one to Anubis and the other to Julian. Mariana understood that it was a sign of apology and supported the girl's idea. While they were busy, they needed to find something they would eat and something that was easy to prepare. Luciana remembered the boy in the cage and said he must be hungry too. Bunny said to make another lunchbox, listen carefully to Julian, and then they could go down to the basement if he would let them. The princess was very glad that Marianne was always on her side. They got out different foods and chose what they would make sandwiches out of. The girl decided that she would show the level of decorator she had achieved in her past life. The princess gave Anubis his lunchbox. He was very grateful to the girl and said it was a work of art. Marianne confirmed and said that the little girl had powers. Anubis was hungry and ate all the sandwiches. The knight took the little girl in her arms, and she told her to carry her further too, to the next customer. They made their way to the elf Julian's laboratory. The wizard thanked the girl for the lunchbox and said the tomatoes looked delicious. Marianne told her not to look at the appearance and promised the elf that they were indeed delicious, and if he didn't believe it, he could ask Anubis, who stood stone-faced, about it. The elf assumed that the princess was bribing him with food and asked if she had forgotten about the boy in the basement. Julian understood that the kind princess wanted to help the sick boy, but the problem was that for the elf to do so would mean committing a crime. The elf didn't realize if he could take on such a responsibility or if he should just run away so he could move on with his life in peace. Marianne told the elf that she wanted to know all the details of how all this was going down.